Well, good morning and welcome to Sunday morning coffee here with Dr. Childress. Mr. Pippin's joining us in my lap here today. In this particular Sunday talk, I'm going to talk about a stark reality that parents are faced with in the family courts, and that is that there is no actual solution for any of the families in the family courts. That there is a solution available, but it's simply not actualizable by the parents because of the number of barriers that you're facing. Now, with this particular pathology, it's a pathology of lies, and it's also pathology of betrayal. And as a result, or as in terms of treatment, it's therefore very important that I always tell you the truth, and I have been. As best to my ability, I've always been straight with you and told you the truth. And I've told you this before as well, that there is no solution. It's a stark reality. And I discussed that several times on my blog because the systems are broken. And so there is no solution to any one family because the systems don't allow a solution. In fact, they prevent a solution. But the moment we change the systems, which is relatively easy and can be done quickly, but isn't, but the moment the systems change, then we get the solution. But for everybody, for all children everywhere. But until those systems change, then it's just like a buzz saw of abuse that's happening in the family courts. So I want to talk about that today. Talk about the reality that parents are facing and some of the decision points that I'm discussing with parents in my consultations and things, and that I think should be a consideration in terms of your decision making, given the nature of the situation. So, to begin with, is just a fundamental premise here, which is that if children are not protected from child abuse, then children will be abused. And that is simply a fact. And that's what's occurring in the family courts. The mental health system and the legal system are not protecting children from child abuse. And so children are being abused. And that's just a fact. So here's sort of a visual representation of what's going on in the family courts. It's a systemic abuse right now, where we have the a pathological parent in there in the center there with the child who is psychologically abusing the child. Then the surrounding mental health system, professional psychology, is participating in the child abuse. So we have two layers of abuse, and we can't actually get to the child to protect the child because of the abuse is being protected or being colluded with by the professional psychology. And then the third layer there is the court prevents and blocks any access to stop the child abuse. So we essentially have the professional psychology and the court system as participants in the child abuse and in the spousal abuse of the targeted parent. And as long as the mental health system and the legal system are participating in the child abuse, then there is no solution for the child abuse. They have the power, both of them, together and individually, to prevent any rescue from the child and to enact the abusive parenting of the pathological parent, which is what's occurring in the family courts. So, as a clinical psychologist in the family courts, I'm actually treating the traumatic grief of the parents here because I can't treat the child abuse because is being the abusers are the mental health people in the court system. So I can't get to the child to treat the child abuse. My treatment of the traumatic grief, just so you're aware, is not to help the person resolve the grief, it's to restore the bond with the child. But I can't get to the child, and the parent is also being prevented from protecting the child. So as a result, there is no resolution of the traumatic grief for the targeted parents in the family courts. So that's what I want to address today. As a clinical psychologist working in the family courts with the trauma, the traumatic grief to the targeted parents being created by the abuse of the other parent and the mental health professionals and the court system. Um, what do we do about that? How do we resolve or address the spousal abuse that's occurring and the traumatic grief in the parents that's occurring in the family courts? And my recommendation for consideration, this would be my treatment plan for the traumatic grief given the situation right now, is to reduce the involvement or the power of the abusive situation. This is systemic abuse. There's nothing you can do to get at the child. It's the court and mental health people are going to do what they are going to do, and the pathological parent. And so you're throwing emotional energy into that and financial resources into that is simply unproductive. It just maintains the abuse. So psychologically, emotionally disconnecting from that abusive situation would be the spousal abuse treatment. And again, I'm addressing this from a spousal abuse concern. The child abuse is simply a done deal. You know, that when the mental health people are participants in the child abuse and when the court is a participant in the child abuse is a done deal. And we can't rescue that child or protect the child, and that child's life is destroyed. So, but then what do we do about the spousal abuse relative to the targeted parent who's just had their child ripped away and watched the systems abuse their child and destroy their child's life? What do we do for that parent? And one first thing is to kind of resolve the traumatic grief that's going on. And then with the ultimate treatment goal, that parent needs to reestablish a life. The abuse is what the abuse is. They can't stop it. And their life in terms of their anticipated family and their children and everything is no longer possible because the powers that have powers said it's going to take a different course. And we're going to take your child away and send them off with a pathological parent. And that's what they're going to do. So to the resolution of that ultimately will be to help that parent process the grief. So there's going to be grief therapy involved with this, but then process the grief of and then the trauma and the helplessness of the trauma that somebody just ripped your children away and you have no power in the situation. So there's a lot of trauma and grief associated with this brutal activity of the courts and the mental health people in the courts. But get some grief therapy and to get your life back, to establish a life. Maybe if you're young enough, you may want to move to another family situation or remarry, those sorts of situations. Older, evolved family situation may lead to other choices, but in terms of enriching your life and refinding the life of the parent. And then as you see the life there and the parent in the center of that regained life, it also extends back though to the spouse, the child, and the trauma of the child and the child abuse going on over there. You just can't do anything about it. So if the child is ever able to get out, or if the mental health people or the court system ever want to release the child from the child abuse, there's a path out to your life, to wonder and good stuff and the things you can provide. But if they're just going to block it off and say, nope, we're going to take the child and give them to a pathological parent and destroy their life, well, then that's what they're going to do. And you can be available and you can provide that life availability to the child and to the professionals and the courts if they want. But you You don't have the power to make that happen when people don't want that to happen. The little circle out there that's empty between is that in that situation, you will need to interact with the court system and do the right thing and continue to do the right thing. But it indicates to not invest a lot of your emotional resources, a lot of your financial resources into that situation. And so that's um, sort of recognizing the reality of the situation. Now, I know your hopes is like, oh, we can solve this as my child, this abusive situation. What can I do? And you're coming in, and there's a strong motivation to re- recover your child and protect your child from the psychological abuse going on. I totally get that. I've been in the family courts for 10 years. I'm working with families in the family courts attempting to do that. I'm also aware that the mental health system is participants in the child abuse. So you have to overcome the mental health people, and the courts are participants in the child abuse. And so the two of those put up significant barriers that are pretty much can't be overcome. In addition, even if you were to be able to break through and get access to the child's going to still be in that same pathology situation. We need a protective separation, child abuse diagnosis, and we need the treatment. And you won't find the mental health people out there who can provide the treatment. So you don't have the mental health people who can diagnose the pathology. You don't have the ones who can do the treatment for it. The system is broken. And as long as the mental health system is broken, there are no resources for you, and the mental health people are participants in the child abuse. So that's understanding that I understand how much you want a solution, and it's right there. It's a clinical diagnostic assessment. We diagnose the child abuse, we protect the child, and move into treatment. However, that's not occurring in the system because the people don't want that to occur in the system. They don't want a solution. And there's various reasons why that is. But until they want the solution, it just becomes spousal abuse of you and financial abuse. So one of the things, the fundamental thing that I would recommend that you do in this situation is to do the right thing and let outcomes take care of themselves. Now, the right thing in this situation is going to be very limited. Okay, you can ask for a clinical diagnostic assessment. You can ask for a treatment plan. You can ask that, you document the symptoms, and you can, diagnostic checklist, parenting practices rating scale. You can ask that those things be completed, and you can ask that you get a clinical diagnostic assessment for child abuse and all the things that I'm recommending in my other places that you do, but just don't expect them to have any effect. Okay, you can ask, they'll say no. Mental health people, you say, what are the symptoms? They'll say, I'm not going to tell you. You can say, can I get a risk assessment? The court will say no. So you can ask, but don't expect to get it. And even if you get it, you're going to potentially have to get the accurate diagnosis and what's the treatment. Protective separation, they're not going to protectively separate the child. And contingent visitation schedule, there's no one that knows how to do that. So even if you get through the initial phases, you're still going to find there's nobody there to diagnose or treat. So I'm saying, who do we get to diagnose and treat? Well, reform a forensic psychologist, maybe get a dialectic behavior. I don't know. There's no one there. There is no mental health services available for you. And the ones you have are so bad. The New York Blue Ribbon Commission, after looking at forensic, said they would rather have no mental health services in New York in the family courts than what these forensic psychologists are giving them and giving you. And I know because I read them. So you're in a difficult position, and there's really no solution until people are motivated to solve it. So given that, what I would recommend that you do is you document the professional barriers, their participation in child abuse for the future now adult child. Okay, I'll talk about that in a second. But you want to document that you are seeking a treatment plan and you're seeking a diagnosis. So do the right thing and give them every opportunity to solve the problem and to protect the child. But recognize that they don't. And then, as they're doing this to you, request a referral to grief therapy. So when they take your kid away, say, okay, wow, that's really devastating. Do you have any recommendations for grief therapy for me now that I've lost my child? And for the documentation piece, what I'm saying in terms of getting a clinical diagnostic assessment, second opinion consultation, and all those sorts of things on a continued visitation schedule, all those things on solution still apply, still go for them. Just recognize that they're going to, the powers that be here is going to say, no, we're going to just take your kid away, and that's what we're going to do. And so, what you want to do is document that clean, and you want to look at Letter to a Stranger from Rights Law on how to document this stuff. And so you document up that this is what you asked from the mental health people, this is what you asked from the court, because when that your children who are being abused and they're going to be isolated and sent off with the abusive parent for the next 10 years, and if and when they reach majority, 18 to 22, and recover some perspective, those that do, they might have legal options on returning to the mental health people involved for failure and duty to protect and things. So you want to get any documentation on that relative to the mental health people and their failure to protect the child and their refusal to document symptoms, refusal to conduct a risk assessment. Get that all documented in, just in case. There's a potential that, one of the things I'm, likely to recommend to the now adult child community of recovering children from the family courts is that they may want to think about setting up some sort of legal defense fund or situation for the children of this family courts who are emerging relative to the mental health services they received. So that would be my recommendation on doing the right thing, is to not get attached to the outcome, recognizing that the outcome is about beyond your ability to control. Do the right thing, ask for the right thing, seek to protect your child, recognizing that the mental health people and the legal system will disempower you from that. They will not allow you to protect your child. And as a result, also another potential consequence of this understanding is that you may want to represent yourself pro se as your own attorney as early as is feasible to spend as little money as possible. So one of the things about this is years of custody conflict that is not going to be successful. Even if you, after years, get the proof, that the pathology's there and you get a switch over in custody, you still have the treatment to resolve. And that's still another hurdle from years of damaged and attachment bonding and stuff. So no way are you going to get a normal range life for your child. That normal range life is out of the question given the courts and the mental health people right now. So it's just going to be a destructive life for you and your children. You're going to do that. I mean, that's what they're going to do. They're going to put you in a situation where you're going to, have to say, protect my child, and over and over, and they'll just say no over and over. But at least while you're doing that, you don't need to spend huge amounts of money to be abused and to be unsuccessful. You can be as unsuccessful as your attorney can be, potentially. So that's the situation. Now, I said as early as feasible. Early on, you may want to get that attorney to make the court orders for the clinical diagnostic assessment, get them to say no, or get them to not do that. Whatever happens off of that, get the orders for the family therapy or the protective separation, or if you can get that or whatever. But you need the clinical diagnostic assessment to get the separation. So I don't know what you can do on that, but you got the potentially an attorney early on for a little bit of the possible solution early on. But once the mental health people and the courts clearly shut that down, then you're just going to say, okay, what are you going to do? And, you got your unsupervised visitation and they're just not going to do something, or whatever happens that is clear that they're going to do what they're going to do, and you're not going to be able to protect your child, then you may want to think about conserving your financial resources. So again, this is sort of the frame of reference that I'm talking about, that once you have the mental health people and the legal system in the systemic abuse situation, the issue is then becomes at least the spousal abuse. See if we can minimize the trauma, or minimize the trauma and respond to it in the targeted parent, some grief therapy, help them get a life back that is theirs, and that potentially would be available if the child that ever comes out. And then put the little dollar sign in there and reduce the financial costs as much as possible on this situation. Now, understand though that based on this approach or understanding, the child will not recover in this situation. It's not like we're expecting, oh, the child's going to recover someday and then we'll realize and want to go back and get that. No, the child's life is lost, okay, to child abuse. The child's not likely to recover insight into what happened for a variety of reasons. And the child's life is essentially destroyed. It's going on a very different pattern, different path based on a lot of destruction to attachment networks and bonding, love and bonding stuff. So the child may be going that way on a normal range life, but now they're going an entirely different way based on the child abuse life. So the child is lost to the child abuse that is perpetrated by the other parent, the mental health professionals, and the court. So I want to make this clear. The child abuse is being perpetrated by the parent, the mental health professionals, and the court. Okay? So those are the child abusers in this situation. And given that situation, I'm going to go back and look for a situation. I'm saying that's a kind of a given situation that the court, mental health, and the pathological parent are all colluding in the abuse of the child. Given that situation, there's pretty much nothing you can do. When a pathological parent and the involved psychologists and the court all want to destroy the child's life, then you as the parent cannot protect the child, and the child's life will be destroyed. Okay, so that's the stark reality of the situation. When the mental health people, the court, and the pathological parent all come together and say, we want to destroy this child's life, guess what? That child's life is going to be destroyed by them. And so then what do we do relative to you and your situation, and how you cope with that spousal abuse, parental abuse, human abuse of having your child ripped away from you? So that's to get the grief therapy and get your life back. So that is, again, something I have spoken about in the past on my blogs, and I'm re-emphasizing again that you are all in this together, and that we cannot rescue any one child until we are able to rescue all the children everywhere, because it requires a systems change, and it requires the mental health people not being participants in the child abuse. It requires the court not being participants in the child abuse, which they can choose to do. But as long as they're choosing to be parts of the child abuse participants, then there's no solution for any parent until we change that, and then the solution becomes available for all parents. So, and again, I want to point out the low level of professional services in the family courts that you're looking at right currently. So, New York Blue Ribbon Commission on Forensic Custody Evaluations, an independent review. said in their analysis, evaluators may rely on principles and methodologies of dubious validity. That we're referring to parental alienation, I think, there, and a bunch of methodologies of dubious validity. In some cases, because of a lack of evidence or the inability of parties to pay for expensive challenges of an evaluation, defective reports can thus escape meaningful scrutiny and are thus often accepted by the court with potentially disastrous consequences for parents and children. So that's the current state of the mental health system in the family courts. These defective reports are going into the judges, and without meaningful scrutiny, the courts accept them with disastrous consequences for children and families. That's the situation. And I read the reports, and I can try to correct what they're doing, but still the court is going to do it. And even if the court makes initially proper decisions, we still don't have the mental health people for treatment. Because this is the level of our mental health services in the family courts is absolutely abysmal. And New York Blue Ribbon Commission would rather have no psychological services than what the courts are being given. By an 11-9 margin, a majority of commission members favor elimination of forensic custody evaluations entirely, arguing that these reports are biased and harmful to children and lack scientific legal value, and at worst, evaluations can be dangerous, particularly in situations of domestic violence and child abuse. So that's our current situation of the mental health system in the family courts. So welcome. You can enter that system and see what you can do about being successful. It's not going to work. You're going to get a custody evaluation. That's what they do. And even if you can get a clinical diagnostic assessment, who conducts it? Nobody. And so you're just going to run into barrier after barrier because the systems are broken that are around you. So the solution for that is ultimately to get the state legislatures on public policy changes on the systemic abuse. Okay, as long as the mental health professionals and court system are participating in the child abuse, there's going to be child abuse. Fact. And so legislatures, maybe you want to break up that little cartel of child abusers in the family courts, of the mental health people in the court system, so that we can stop abusing children and actually start protecting them. So that's the solution on this. Now, the problem over here in that solution, I told people that's the solution 10 years ago. The issue is you parents don't enact into the solution because you're worried about, what about my family? What about my children? What about my child? And I've seen that for 10 years and trying to work with individual family and individual family and individual family, solving it one family at a time. But that's not going to be effective because the system is broken and we're trying to solve it in a broken system. However, parents don't see a larger perspective and don't move in ways that are effective for changing systems. And once you're through your own trauma and abuse, you kind of move away because you want to escape the trauma and abuse. And so the next families keep coming into the same system. You don't cleanse the mental health people out of the system, and you don't advocate at the upper levels with any effectiveness because you're a traumatized brain for a variety of reasons. But that's fundamentally the situation. And so we'll be looking at this for a period of time. Now, the pathological parent is abusing the child and is set on destroying the child's life. The mental health professionals are participating in the psychological child abuse by the parent, and the courts are participating in the child and spousal abuse. So that's the situation, okay, that you're looking at. And when a parent, the therapist, and the court are child abusers who seek to destroy the child's life, you, as a protective parent, cannot protect your child, and the child's life will be destroyed. The One of the things that is also occurring in the family courts that is interesting for you is that the pathology itself has reached the state legislatures, um, and with these Cadence law variants, and they are written primarily through the domestic violence monkeys, the borderline mom spectrum of this pathology to disempower fathers. The most problematic area is they've taken away all your rights to call expert witnesses. Any expert witness you call in your custody case has to be an expert in clinical sex abuse. They have to actually have treated sex abuse. Why? Well, that's your domestic violence monkeys. They want their experts in on the, sex abuse and domestic violence kind of thing. Now, fortunately for you, I meet those qualifications. So I am a qualified expert under Cadence law, but you won't have any other qualified experts that you can call on because they all have to be domestic violence people who are experiencing sex abuse. The other thing is it's basically taking away your parental alienation as any sort of allegation. They're saying that's not allowed in the family courts. So all your Gardner PAS people trying to get the DP, everybody, that's been essentially wiped out by statute, is that you cannot offer that into the court. Luckily, again, for you, I'm here. I anticipated that. So you have shared delusional disorder, factitious disorder, child psychological abuse. However, good luck getting that. And so there's a number of things going on right now in the legislatures on Cadence law that is basically setting you and future parents up to have no solution ever. And you parents are pretty apathetic about it. You should be getting me to testify in the state legislatures. This is a perfect opportunity for me to be testifying to your state legislature. But I can't do that. These are your legislators, and you're just letting the thing go right on by without moving into effective solutions. Plus, we have the New York Blue Ribbon Commission and their take on forensic custody. That's got legislation moving in New York. I should be testifying there, but no parent in New York is getting my testimony, nor parents from nationally alerting the New York legislature and people about Dr. Childress and my work. So here you have a perfect opportunity for some legislative efforts, and you just let them pass on by because you're not motivated to help each other. You're not motivated for a broader. You just want to know, how do I get my children back? How do I get my child back? How do I get my? And there's no way to get your child back. We can fight. You can struggle. We can try to piece something together, but there is no solution until we solve it for everybody with the structural and systemic changes that we need to be making. So the other feature that I want to point out, given the whole situation, I've spent 10 years here, I know kind of what's going on, is that there's currently a conflict of interest in professional psychology. That currently there are psychologists with names who are intentionally disabling the mental health system response to the pathology in the family courts for their own financial and career status gain. So we need to shift over to clinical diagnostic assessments and effective treatment. And they're doing forensic custody evaluations that the Blue Ribbon Commission wants to get rid of. So, but they don't want that. And so they don't want the transition or the change, because then they have to acknowledge they were a complete failure and they have to leave the family courts, because that's all they do is these failed forensic custody evaluations. We need a clinical diagnostic assessment. So changing of the guard, paradigm shift. So they are going to disable that change to a solution. So that's the current situation. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my Sunday talk. Oh, here we go. My Sunday talk on a stark reality that there is no solution in the family courts for your individual situation. There is, but there's not. It's kind of a weird sort of thing. As soon as people want to solve it, it's solvable. But right now, mental health people are participating in child abuse courts, participating in child abuse court wants to do that, and the mental health people want to do that. So that puts you in a helpless situation. So it's now coping with your abuse and trauma, and how do we deal with that and deal with the reality of child abusing mental health professionals and child abusing legal system. So with that, I'm going to run off to my Sunday. Good luck, everybody, and we'll talk with you about some other aspect of the court pathology next week.